Welcome to another edition of Wildcat Country. Eric Cohn and Shane Dale. Before we get going on this program, and our buddy Jeff Dean's going to join us later in the show for some analysis and then picks in the last segment, let me give a shout out. We do Shane's standouts right off the bat. I want to give a shout out to my co-host Shane Dale, who picked on this program last week Arizona to win the game by 1 point, 20-19. And Shane, the final score was 21-20. So you are the real standout because you saw this coming from a mile away.
What do they say about a broken clock or the blind squirrel? Hey, I was due. Okay. And this shows me that I just need to go out and just make picks based on pure gut instinct and none of your, ridiculous hippie research that you do at CBS.
Yeah, thank you.
I mean, you're right most of the time, but that's probably just all luck. And so, no, clearly. Seriously, though, you're a much better prognosticator than I am. But yeah, I was really hoping to be wrong is the ironic thing. I was hoping that was going to be an easy win over Stanford. I just felt like it wasn't going to. It was going to be a grinded out game, especially on the offensive side of the ball, just knowing what we've seen from the offense specifically through 3 and now 4 games. So I'm just glad that they got out of Dodge with a win. It's not anything to celebrate terribly. They won 21-20. A week earlier, Sacramento State beat Stanford 23-20. So you have to keep that in mind. But look, regardless, they're 3-1, where we all thought they probably would be realistically at this point of the season. And they may or may not have a chance to hit the reset button with a new quarterback, which I know we're going to discuss shortly.
Shane, it was a bad performance. Any way you want to look at it. I thought Arizona deserved to lose. I'm not really sure how they won the game. I guess we'll kind of break that down a little bit, but it was a game that Arizona loses 9 times out of 10.
Yeah.
It was one of those wins that you got it. And I thought I was like, ugh, what was
I
that?
still believe, as ugly as it was in it, and I was tested this theory that I have. Mm-hmm. Any road win is a good win. I still believe it.
Were they caught looking ahead? I think
no,
so.
No, I don't think so.
I do.
No, I just think that they're just that inept at times. And Jaden DeLore specifically, his decision making, and then they struggle on one aspect on the defensive side of the ball on 3rd and long. And they got fortunate that Stanford missed a pair of field goals, which they typically don't do. Yeah, I that's a game that Arizona probably, on one hand, they should have won. On the other hand,
should have lost.
Based on what they played, they should have lost. And so I'm thankful they got out of Dodge with a win.
All right, give us your standout, Shane standouts before we get going.
Yeah, well, let's pivot away from football for just a moment. I want to mention Sammy Batosh of the soccer team, sophomore who scored twice in Arizona's 3-0 win over Oregon on Friday, which was their Pac-12 opener. So they're 1-0 in Pac-12 play. It was her 2nd and 3rd goals of the season. If you remember last year, Eric, Sammy Batosh, she made national headlines when she scored this goal while lying on the ground. You remember that? Like goal.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if you call it like a ground bicycle kick or what, but it was just ridiculous. But she scored twice against Oregon. Arizona's 4-2-3 this season. They've only allowed 9 goals in 9 games, thanks in large part to Hope Heisey, their star goalkeeper. So Becca Morrow says that program going in the right direction. So I want to mention shout out to the soccer team before we get and shout out to European football before we get into American football. Now,
do you want to give any standouts on the football team?
Well, yeah, I'm getting there.
Okay.
And look, Arizona would not have beaten Stanford without Noah Fifita's poise coming in trailing on the run. He came in cold, not having played a meaningful snap of college football, except a couple of plays. I think was it against Washington last year where
Virginia got right. For the most part, he has not played a meaningful snap of college football.
Yeah, but he kept it simple in the 4th quarter. Made some good decisions, even tried to throw a block in there, which I kind of hope he doesn't do going forward. But he led Arizona down the field, got him the lead, and then completed a pair of passes on Arizona's final possession, both to Jacob Cowling to run out the clock, which was massive because, if Stanford had gotten the ball back, they would have won. They would have marched down the field and won 23-21. So got to mention Noah Fifita. Also, Jonah Coleman, who shouldered most of the load for Arizona's ground game after Michael Wiley went out with the injury. 75 yards on 12 carries. And then once again, speaking of the Servite guys, Jacob Manu, 12 total tackles, half sack, 1.5 TFLs, and 2 quarterback hits against Stanford. Arizona's defense had some issues against Stanford, but they did have 11 tackles for loss, which is a very impressive number.
Well, it's time for buy or sell, and this one will be an interesting one. It's presented by our friends at Ice Shaker. Go to iceshaker.com. Use promo code Wildcat Country, capital W, capital C, and get $5 off and drink out of one of those beauties like Shane is on our stream here.
And if you do own an Ice Shaker, I understand if you were drinking something a little stronger for that Stanford game.
Yeah. I wish I was. Let me tell you that. Yeah. Or you can go to fanatics.com, get yourself an Ice Shaker there. All right, Shane, number one on the docket this week. Jayden de Laura at less than 100% or Noah Fifita?
Well, I will echo what most Arizona fans would probably say, and are probably thinking if they're watching or listening, and that I would take at this point a 100% Noah Fifita over a 100% Jayden de Laura. Just based on what we've seen, I think it's time to explore other opportunities, and Noah Fifita is another opportunity. Again, small sample size. I think a lot of Arizona fans who want to see him as the guy, want to see him start, are putting way too much pressure on him because we don't know what we're going to get. But I think we've seen enough out of Jayden de Laura. We've talked about it, Eric. The better part of the last 6 games, going back to last season, so half a season's worth of games, he just hasn't been very good. It's not his ability, it's his decision making. He just has not made good decisions. He's running back with 20, 30 yards with the ball. He's throwing, he's throwing balls into coverage, even against Stanford. You know, Jedd Fisch said after the game, hey, Jayden de Laura didn't throw an interception. Well, it wasn't for lack of trying. He tried on a couple of occasions. Look, he can be great at times. That 3-play drive that ended with the pass to Tanner McLaughlin, the double fake and then the throw. Yeah. Perfect, textbook, chef's kiss, everything. But those moments are just too few and far between for me. And I would like to see Noah Fifita get an opportunity. I hope, we never root for an injury, but if Jayden's not 100%, because he probably will start if he is. Mm-hmm. But if he's not, and it's a high ankle sprain, or it's just a sprain, or whatever, calf, or whatever the issue is, and he's just not, he's kind of 50-50. I would like to see him on the sideline and see Noah Fifita get a chance against the great Washington team.
All right, so here's my prediction, and this is Tuesday night, and I may be proven wrong by the end of the week, and if so be it. Wouldn't be the first time on this show, and I can guarantee you it will not be the last. I think Jayden de Laura will be out for a few games. I think Noah Fifita will get his chance against Washington. I think he'll get his chance against USC, and he'll get his chance against Washington State.
Do you think Jedd knows Jayden's out?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. No, I think
keep Washington guessing.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that Jayden did not come back in the game and did not look close to coming back in the game against Stanford is everything that I needed to know. I would be very surprised. He's trying to play gamesmanship, but I don't think it matters. With that said, I am going to say that Noah Fifita gets 3 chances to start in a row. And if so, if he wins one of those games, he's your permanent starter. Those are 3 really tough games. So I don't think that's going to happen.
Well, but the crazy thing, Eric, is that Arizona could easily go 0-3 in those games, and Noah Fifita could have 3 good games. I mean, because they're going up against the one star, I think it was On 3, had ranked the top 3 quarterbacks in the country, or the next 3 that Arizona's facing. Yeah. Okay. Not just in the Pac-12, but in the entire country. So look, and Noah Fifita could go out, and we'll make our predictions later, but he can go out and throw for 300 yards, rush for 50, and have 4 total touchdowns against Washington, and Arizona could still lose by 2 touchdowns.
Yeah.
So that's just something to consider, as long as he plays well. And look, we all know how it works. If he goes out and has an outstanding game, then, and maybe he will, maybe he won't. But if he does, then Jedd is good. Yes. Even as much as Jedd loves Jayden de Laura, we know he does. He's going to have to sit back and think, well, maybe this is the direction we need to go.
Number 2, Shane, Jedd's play calling thus far this season, buy or sell?
I'm going to sell. I'm going to sell. I'm kind of somewhat reluctantly, because I think maybe it's a little. I think Jayden de Laura has been the biggest issue, more so than the play calling. I just think my biggest issue is that I wish, I wish for Jayden, I wish Jedd would keep it a little bit simpler sometimes. He gets a little too cute with the play calling. Sometimes I'm just not sure why he's throwing when he should run, and vice versa. Hindsight's always 20/20 when the play doesn't work out. But I don't think I think he has a brilliant mind that I don't think he needs to be quite as brilliant as he is sometimes, if that makes sense. He gets a little too elaborate. And I think I think another thing with Noah Fifita, if Noah's the guy, I think he might be encouraged, just because Noah hasn't had a start at college football at the college level, to keep things a bit simpler. Kind of like, I know we don't like to talk about Kevin Sumlin, like he did the game we went to against UCLA when Grant Gunnell came in.
Gunnell started.
Very simple scheme that he had against UCLA, and it worked okay for him in that game. So that could be the similar situation for Noah. But I don't think Jedd's a bad play caller. I just think he gets a little too cute and a little too in love with his playbook a bit sometimes.
Yeah, I'm not impressed. I'm going to sell Jed's play calling this year. Not impressed one bit. I think it looks like he's saving it up for something. Like the creativity. I mean, I guess he's tried to get cute here and there, but I feel like he's just not. There's no rhythm to it. I don't feel like Arizona's ever in a rhythm. I'm really disappointed because we saw, and I guess maybe in the second half of the ASU game is when this started, and maybe I have not. Arizona's first halves have really not been good. I mean, you look all around, like think about it. Yeah. They were up against NAU, they weren't great. Against Mississippi State, they weren't great. UTEP, Stanford. I mean, 4 bad first halves in a row. I think when are they going to come out and do something?
Yeah, they keep having slow starts. I think he's a little too stubborn. And I think I'm thinking back to the ASU game since you mentioned it. We were all screaming for him to run the ball more. And he did finally in the second half, but it shouldn't have taken him that long. So I think sometimes it's okay to realize, okay, what I'm doing isn't working. Maybe I need to pivot. And I think he's a little slower than I would like to adjust. You don't want to, make knee-jerk decisions and abandon your game plan if it's not working early. But I think you have to adjust play by play and drive by drive. And I think Jed sometimes is a little slow to do that.
But where's the rhythm? I mean, that's what I'm talking about. Like, where is when you can see really good play callers, they get into a rhythm and they're just, they're flowing, everything's working, everything. Yeah. We haven't even seen that against bad teams, Shane. They played 3 bad teams, and Mississippi State's probably nothing special. And we haven't seen that really much at all.
Yeah, it gets kind of the chicken or the egg question. Does it really start with the offense on the field, or does it start with the play calling? And I'm really not sure. I think it has more to do with the offense, specifically Jayden de Laura. But I haven't been thrilled with Jed's play calling either.
All right, number 3, Shane. Jonah Coleman needs more carries. Buy or sell?
Easiest buy on the list. And we saw it, and we don't. As much as I love Michael Wiley, and I hope he's able to go against Washington or at least come back soon, he is not as irreplaceable as a lot of guys on offense are, simply because Arizona has a lot of depth at running back. I actually think they're going to miss him more in the passing game, which could be a bigger deal if you have Noah Fifita, who might need more of a safety valve because he is their best pass catching running back. The other guys can do it too, but he's their best pass catcher. I mean, Mississippi State's coach mentioned before the Arizona game about how great a receiver Michael Wiley was. So I think they'll miss him in that regard. But in terms of running the ball, I think we were hoping that Jonah Coleman would get more touches. And it's a shame that it happened that way. But the talent is obviously there between him and then DJ Williams is good in short yardage situations for the most part. He did a good job when Noah Fifita was in the game, finishing that drive against Stanford. Rayshon Luke is a great change of pace back, and he can catch the ball too. I like to see him catch the ball a little bit more. So, Coleman, I think, is their number one tailback with Wiley out. Maybe even with Wiley in, he's their number one tailback. But I would like to certainly see him get close to double-digit touches every game.
Yeah, I think Coleman looks the part. He's a beast, and Wiley's been good, but Wiley has not been as good as we saw in the first half of the ASU game. I don't know how he ever could be.
Yeah,
but Jonah Coleman, and I'll tell you, all the running backs have been pretty good this year. If there's a bright spot, I mean, they've done the job. But I'd like to see him get the lion's share against Washington. And I'll tell you what I want to see on Saturdays. I want to see Arizona, get a lead or try to play ball control. Try to, hold the ball for 35, 40 minutes.
Yeah.
That's how you win. You got to keep Michael Penix off the field, and you got to obviously get some stops there, but you got to keep him off the field. I mean, literally run the stinking clock while you can. And
I think if Noah Fifita is the starter, that they might be more inclined to play that way, instead of going for the big chunk plays. Number one, I don't think Jed's going to dial up as much of that stuff. And number two, I think Noah is just going to be a bit more of that manager who's looking for those shorter throws as opposed to the home run throw that Jayden does too often.
Number 4, Shane, Arizona's offensive line is a problem right now.
I will buy in the sense that the lack of continuity, I think, has been difficult. Raymond Polito missed the first 3 games of the season. He finally comes in. They have to adjust to that, and then he goes out again, and who knows if he's going to play against Washington. So I think that's a missing component. I know that the Jets shifted some guys around in between games in the game. There was one play in particular where Stanford just rushed 3 and they got to Jayden de Laura. Sometimes Jayden just holds the ball too long, but that wasn't the case there. So it's a little concerning. It's not the most concerning part of the game for me. I think it's got to be frustrating for Jed and the offensive staff that they just haven't been able to keep Polito healthy and see what he can do, because I think give him a couple games and I think they could really get into a rhythm. But it is a bit of a problem, but I think it's more of a continuity issue.
I'm just, the running backs have been okay. The offensive line's been okay. I wouldn't say it's a problem, so I'm going to slightly sell this, but it's not as good as I thought it would be. Okay. I thought we would see better from the offensive line, and just, I guess maybe the entire offense. I mean, Jayden de Laura, offensive line, wide receivers, fine, doing fine. The running backs, good. So
that's kind of how you feel about the offense right now. That's probably the best word to describe it. Yeah.
All right. So our bonus question before we get to our buddy Jeff Dean. So you and I will be there on Saturday night. We'll be sitting in the north end zone. I'm sure we'll post some content on the, on the X or Twitter or whatever you got to call it. But we'll put this one right out there, Shane. Beating Washington would be Arizona's biggest home win since at least Oregon in 2007, when the Ducks were number 2 in the country. Buy or sell?
I will buy that it's Oregon, but I'm going to sell the year because I'm thinking 2013, because that just kind of came out of nowhere. BJ Denker's year, and they don't just beat Marcus Mariota and the Ducks; they destroy them in a kind of a rainy day in Tucson. And by the way, I gave up the option to go to that game, and I'm still.
I was there. That's a good one. I forgot about that game, Shane, and the Scooby right. Yeah, the Ducks went on obviously the next year to play in the national championship game.
The 2007 game, that I think was like a Thursday or a Friday.
It was a Thursday night game. Yep.
And so it was national. It was the only game on national TV, and so from that perspective, and Oregon was number 2. Their quarterback gets hurt, so you have to consider that portion of it as well. But that was where they started to turn the corner as a program and kind of let the national college football fans know that they were about to do that. But I think the 2013 game, as far as home games, it was right before the ASU
great
game.
Call.
Yeah, it was right before the ASU game where they got destroyed. But the week before that, they went out and beat, BJ Denker, and Arizona could do no wrong. Oregon couldn't do anything right. It was just like a magical game and the following year they beat them in Eugene. But you're talking about home games. I think if Arizona were to beat Washington, it would be their biggest home win since that one.
There aren't very many people who know the history of at least the Territorial Cup better than my co-host here, because he's written 2 books on it. But I mean, how many? Listen, this one I totally forgot, and I was at that game, and that's why Shane is a pro. This is why we do the podcast together. He knows his stuff, and I like to think every now and then that so do I. But we'll see about that. We are going to bring a guy on who definitely knows his stuff. He's the voice of Arizona Stadium and McKale Center, and the original founder of this podcast, Jeff Dean. Coming up next here on Wildcat Country.
What's up, Wildcat Country? It's Robbie G, baby, and I am gearing up for a big year with Coach Jedd Fisch and excited to see what the Arizona Wildcats do this football season. And just like the football team, we stepped up our program as well with the official licensed U of A Ice Shaker, baby. Check it out and get it at fanatics.com. Bear down, Arizona. Let's go.
Shane, it's always a pleasure to have the founder of this program, who is now the voice of Arizona Stadium and McKale Center, our buddy Jeff Dean, join us here on Wildcat Country.
What number is this for Jeff?
I think it's 17 or 18. I'd have to
say he's approaching 20, isn't he?
Yeah, he and Moreno are in a fight for the lead here, Shane. It's very close as to who has the most Wildcat Country appearances, neck and neck. But anyways, we're glad to have Jeff back on the program. Well, Jeff, we'll make this one an easy question to start. So would you rather have let's say 75% at best Jayden de Laura or Noah Fifita start on Saturday?
I mean, you always want your players to be at 100%. So, I mean, if it was a 75% JDL or a 100% Noah Fifita, I would probably side with the Noah Fifita, just because I want 100% health, especially in the starting lineup. But if it's 100, I think it's still JDL's job, and I'm sure we'll have plenty of opportunity to talk about that.
Yeah, Jeff, if it is Noah Fifita on Saturday, and the small sample size we saw against Stanford, very efficient, did what he had to do down the stretch. What are your thoughts on him going into that game, especially against a Washington team that is obviously very good, but can be scored on and have yards racked up against them, as we saw against Cal last week?
Yeah, I think that this is a situation where Noah has been here just as long as Jayden has, at least as far as Arizona.
They arrived the same day on campus, I guess, is what Jed said. Yeah.
Oh, okay, sure.
Yeah.
I mean, that probably makes sense. I mean, I know that they both were, early arrivals, and I know that Noah was excited to get here as early as possible. So that makes sense that they would both have arrived on the same day. So then, yeah, they've had the exact same amount of time in Jed's offense then, which is always good. You want to have familiarity with the offense when you're talking about the starting quarterback, obviously, and you want as many quarterbacks in that room to be familiar with the offense as possible. I always have full faith in what Noah is doing. I think that Noah is a lot like his teammate on the defensive side of the ball from Servite High School and Jacob, and that he's a fast learner. And I think that when you put him onto the field, I think he's able to, and he's shown this in plenty of backup situations before where he's been thrust onto the field. He looks like someone who is always prepared to take the reins, and there's no drop off when Noah comes into the game. It gives the offense a little bit of a different look. Obviously, he's got some different tools at his disposal that make him a little bit of a different type of threat and a different type of problem to solve for the defense, like you see often with backup quarterbacks. But it's not a situation where Arizona is going from a Nick Foles, pocket type of passer to then a quarterback that comes in that is just strictly a running quarterback, which is a lot of times what you find at college, at the college level, where the backup is so different from the starter that you have to rearrange the entire playbook, which can be a detriment to the defense as well, because they've spent all week preparing for one guy and you get a different guy. So with Noah, you get a very, very similar tool set to Jayden de Laura. But like I said, I think he's a guy that, just like Jacob Manu, who we've seen, is up to the task on the field at all times.
A lot of Wildcat fans, Jeff, have soured on Jayden de Laura. Eric and I have our concerns as well. The ability there's no question in his ability. The decision making, I think, is what we question. And so, but you're always the optimist. If Jayden takes the field against Washington, tell us why he gives Arizona a chance to hang in and maybe even pull off the big upset.
Well, Jayden is a tremendous quarterback. That's why it gives Arizona a chance to win the football game and pull the upset against Washington this Saturday. And that's the reason why. And I'm not saying that Noah Fifita is not. The reason that Arizona has a chance to win on Saturdays is because of the sum of the parts. The whole is essentially what makes Arizona so good. And I think, and I've obviously read and in watching the games and stuff like that, I get frustrated sometimes with Jayden de Laura as well. But I think that in his situation this year, it often just seems like there's a lack of rhythm. It seems like there's a lack of cohesion from play to play. Yeah. It often seems like to me, it almost seems like he's only going out there knowing he's going to get one shot at it, just one play for the team to score.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of times how I feel he's approaching each series, which is, it's unfortunate because, in college football, it's about racking up as many first downs as you possibly can. I mean, that's what it is. And I've said this all season long, that Arizona's offense needs to be staying on schedule in order for it to be successful. And this year it has been very often not on schedule. And what I mean on schedule is, I mean staying ahead of the change where you're gaining yardage on every single play, and you're also staying within the rhythm of the offense. And I just felt like they've been very disjointed this year. And to be honest, I don't think that has very much to do with the quarterback situation. And I'm going to slam the coaches a little bit. I feel like last year, and I know this wasn't prompted, but I'm going to say it anyways. I feel like last year, this team, the coaching staff was able to squeeze a lot more out of a group of very, very young but talented players and able to compete in games. This year, I feel like they're just barely getting by with those same players that have now been more seasoned and are now more experienced, and they've added even more talent in the transfer portal and things like that, and brought in guys that have more experience and more talent and more size, and they're just kind of barely getting by. So I'm wondering why the coaching staff hasn't really taken the reins off of this thing, or if they're being too careful. I'm not exactly sure, but I feel like last year these guys were being coached up to compete in games. And I think right now they're not being coached as well as they should be in order to blow the teams out that they should have blown out this year.
All right. So, Jeff, if you were to give a grade right now through 4 games to Jedd Fisch's play calling, what would you give it?
I think the play calling isn't bad. The situation that I find with Arizona, it's like, okay, when I look at the field and I see, aside from the quarterback, you've got Michael Wiley in the backfield, you've got Tanner McLaughlin, as the tight end, then you've got your 3 wide receivers. You got T-Mac, you got Cowing, and you got Lemonious Craig. And I want to get the ball to all 5 of those players. And then there's 3 other guys on the sideline that I would love to see get the ball more, between Rayshon Luke, DJ Williams, Kevin Green Jr. I'd like to see all 3 of those guys get the ball as well, because I know what those guys can do in the open field. And I know that there's very few players in this conference that can compete with those guys in an open field situation. And I want to see them get the ball more, but there's only one ball to go around. So I don't think that the play calling has been a problem at all. I think what the problem has honestly been is being able to find which guy to get the football to on a consistent basis, with rhythm, with timing, and within the framework of that offense.
So let's talk about Arizona's defense for a second. It's been really good. I mean, outside of Mississippi State, where they give up 31, but that was 5 turnovers, and they were set up in
overtime.
In overtime, right. Yeah. So, I mean, you're talking about a defense that's legitimately in, 3 games given up, 33 points, and then the Mississippi State game offhand, let's say 17 maybe on their own, if not. I mean, Johnny Nanson's done a great job. Does this defense, in your opinion, Jeff, stand a prayer of holding Washington under 35 points this week?
It's the best defense we've seen since the Stoops era, and that's all I know. I don't think that this team has faced a real juggernaut offensively yet this year. They're going to face it this Saturday. I mean, that's for sure. I mean, Michael Penix is the leading candidate for the Heisman Trophy. I've watched Washington play twice this year, and every time I've watched them play, they've cut through the opposing team's defense like it was wet toilet paper. I mean, it is really impressive how crisp and how explosive they are. They have talent at wide receiver, running back, tight end. Obviously, Penix is delivering the ball at a really electric rate. But this is the best defense that Arizona has had, like I said, since the Stoops era, and I think that what I have seen so far, and you mentioned the Mississippi State game against, that was on the road against an SEC school in overtime. The scoring drives in regulation were lengths of 6 yards, 22 yards, 50 yards, and 57 yards. Those were their scoring drives. Football, when it all boils down to it, it's a game of field position. If you have to force the other team to go 90 when you only have to go 80, you're probably gonna win that football game 9 times out of 10. So I don't put that on the defense. Those points were given up by the offense. Just plain and simple. I mean, 3 drives inside the 50 is ridiculous. So the defense, to me, has really, really done well. Now, there have been some problems with chunk plays. I think they gave up 6 or 7 plays of 20 or more yards against Stanford, and several of them on 3rd and long situations.
And guess who leads the college football in chunk plays?
Yeah, definitely Washington. It's got to be, right. I
Yep.
mean, yeah, Washington or Oregon. I mean, that's pretty much it. So it's a good point. So that's even scarier now that I think about it. But so I don't know if it's been scheme, if it's been player personnel type situations that have been those chunk plays. I just know that it often seems like those chunk plays are not coming on 1st and 10. They're coming on situations where we know that the team has to get 12, 13, 14 yards, and they're getting it, which is the more I think troubling situation there.
Yeah, and you led me right into my next question, Jeff, because I think Stanford's average 3rd down length was like 12 yards against Arizona, and they converted like about half of them. And in most of those situations, Arizona would bring 3, maybe 4 guys. I feel like Johnny Nanson's got to roll the dice a little bit and try to bring pressure on Michael Penix. Otherwise, he's just going to pick them apart on Saturday. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I've seen some things developing throughout this season where I've noticed more Wildcats in the backfield progressively throughout each game, and then the culmination being in the previous game against Stanford, 11 TFLs in that game. And I think the more impressive stat than that, I mean, that's the most TFLs that an Arizona defense has had in like 7 years, I think. The more impressive statistic there was that of those 11 TFLs, 11 different players had at least one half of accredited tackle to their name in those, which is you'd be hard pressed to find another team in college football with a similar stat this season like that. I mean, that's just amazing to have 11 different players in the backfield making tackles. So I absolutely agree. I think if they're going to try to do what other teams have not been able to do against Washington, you have to get after Michael Penix, because he has been known to get some happy feet back in when he was at Indiana, when he was using his legs a lot more to his benefit because he wasn't as crisp of a passer. Yes, he was very dangerous coming out of the backfield, and he still can be. But I think that now that he's gotten so comfortable throwing the football, he doesn't want to be disrupted back there. And I think the only way to get and try to, steal this football game, what would be a huge upset right now, is to disrupt that backfield and create as much havoc back there as possible.
Great. Last question for you, and this is a little sideways. It's more like a what if situation, but we like to do this. Say Noah Fifita gets the start on Saturday. Presumably then Braden Dorman would be the backup, and we haven't seen much of him, but he's very highly touted quarterback, a pro style quarterback, top 20, top 25 according to most services. If he has to come in for whatever this game or later in the season, what should Wildcat fans expect from him? And would Jed kind of have to change up his scheme at that point?
Out of Braden Dorman, you mean?
Yes.
I think that you would see a lot, some more running plays. I think you'd see a lot more just, really, one read ball out type of stuff. You would probably see him lock on to a receiver that he's probably just gotten really comfortable with. And oftentimes for third string, fourth string backups that we've seen in situations like when in the NFC Championship game last year, for instance, with the 49ers, he found Deebo Samuel and was just throwing the football to Deebo basically the entire time, which is not a bad idea. Now, for Braden Dorman's case, maybe that's a Tanner McLaughlin, maybe it's a Jacob Cowing, maybe it's a T-Mac, I don't know. But they would usually find someone that they trust right away and just keep pumping them. But then I also think you'd see a lot more two-back sets, maybe some more 22 personnel with McLaughlin and Miranda as double tight end, and then Wiley and DJ Williams, or Wiley and any multitude of the running backs that we have back there. If Wiley's able to go either, I mean, I know Mike's been hobbled since the UTEP game. He came off early there. He looked hurt in that game and didn't look right to begin the Stanford game either, obviously. So I think you'd see more 22 personnel, more two-back sets, more running the football, and then just quick out, get the ball out quickly.
What do you think of Dorman, though? Just because we haven't talked about him a lot, and he's a big name, a big recruit. I mean, does he have a chance to be a starter for Arizona down the road?
Who knows? Because coming next year, Damon Williams is right behind him. And people are talking about Damon Williams like he's going to walk on campus and start day one because he's that good. I don't know much of Braden Dorman other than what his scouting report said coming out of high school and what I've seen from him in warmups before games. Because I even the practice that I attended, he didn't really do much in that practice that day. So, from what I see, he looks a lot like a freshman college quarterback. And you just never kind of know what you got until they're thrust into there and see what happens when they're standing in front of their huddle of their brothers and take that first snap, which I hope we only see in mop-up duty at some point, but it could be emergency duty at some situation.
Well, Jeff, last question for this segment before you join us for picks in the final segment and we get your game prediction. Let's say Arizona were to pull off the upset as a 17.5-point underdog. In your memory as an Arizona fan and obviously, part of the program in a way as the public address announcer, where would this rank in terms of greatest upsets in your mind in the modern era of Arizona football?
Yeah, I mean, you obviously have to think about the other Washington upset, right? When they were number one ranked team in the country, they came to Tucson and got whipped 16-3 in that game. You obviously have to think about it right there, because Washington got a first place vote this year, and I know, or a first place vote this week in the AP, and I don't put a whole lot of weight into what the AP was doing. I don't know who that vote was from. It's probably from the Seattle writer, and that's fine. They've certainly proven themselves as one of the 5 best teams in the country. Mm-hmm. And anytime you're playing one of the 5 best teams in the country, I mean, it's kind of interchangeable, especially if you watch the way that Georgia has played this year, the way that Michigan has kind of played with their food a little bit at times. Watching Ohio State play, wasn't too impressed with them, as potentially saying we are by far the number 1 team in the country, kind of thing. So, I think this would be right up there with any time Arizona has beaten the best team in the country or the best team in the conference, and they have a chance to do that this Saturday.
It should be a barn burner one way or the other, and you'll get our score predictions coming up next year in Wildcat Country. All right, it's time for what we've all been waiting for the entire show, and that's picks. And we're glad to have our buddy Jeff Dean, who's going to try to gain some redemption for our guest pickers. Barrett Baker ruffling last week, 3-6-1. Shane and I, carried the load 7-2-1, but I have an 8-game lead. I'm 26.
Man, if I had not gotten stupid and taken UCLA over Utah, I would have beaten you. But hey, I'm a lot better last week, and so just so you know, Jeff, I just went with my gut. I didn't do any research last week. Mm-hmm. I just went with my gut, and I did a lot better than I did the week before when I looked up all these stats. So
amazing how that works.
Ignorance is bliss. Bring it on.
And let me point this out. I'm 4-0 with Arizona against the spread this year. Shane is 3-1. We'll see how Jeff is. Let's see if he can go 1-0. All right, let's start with a game on Friday night. Really interested in this one. Utah at Oregon State. The Beavers are favored by 3.5. Shane, I'll start with you. Who you got?
I'll go with Oregon State to rebound. I think that their home field advantage, especially in the Northwest, means a lot. Utah can't move the ball. I think Oregon State will find a way to grind out 17 to 20 points. So I like them to cover.
Jeff?
I like Utah in this game. I'll take Utah plus the 3. I just feel like with that defense and what I saw out of that game between Wazoo and Oregon State last week, I think Utah can find some offense against the Oregon State team that has been a little bit overrated on that side of the ball so far this season. So I like Utah plus 3.
I'm going to even give you 3.5 in this one because the line is shifting that way. I'm going to go with Oregon State here. Oregon State is the best home team against the spread since 2021. 13-1 straight up and against the spread at home. Their only loss last year to USC by 3, 17-14. I think Oregon State, I was not impressed with the quarterback situation. Nate Johnson, if Cam Rising comes back, it's going to be rusty. I think Oregon State wins this by at least a touchdown. So I'm going with the Beavs. All right, here's a game that, I pegged Colorado spot on last week. I think, Shane, you and I I think Barrett had it as well. Yeah. Their USC is now favored by 21.5 at Colorado. I mean, you guys know what I'm going to pick. So I'm going with Trojans big. Jeff, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I like USC minus 21.5 on this one as well. I think they blow out the Buffs in Boulder, and as our friend Denny Green used to say, they are who we thought they were.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you all saw the USC ASU game Saturday.
I did.
USC basically played drunk and won by 2 touchdowns. Like they made every single mistake you could think of. Yeah. And ASU was better, but they're still not that good. So USC they look they're a little disinterested. Maybe looking ahead to the Dion game, the Colorado Dions, Colorado Primes, whatever you want to call them. I think USC is going to win comfortably, but I think Colorado being at home will at least keep it somewhat respectable. So I'm going to take USC to win, but I'm not going to take the points.
If that wasn't a classic look-ahead game by USC last week, I don't know what was. I think they had their eyes on. Go ahead, Jeff.
ASU had a real tough guy performance out of that running back.
Scadaboo
had an incredible game.
He really did. That's a good point. Yeah, and USC's defense looked like we thought they were, but I just don't see how Colorado stops them. So I think USC scores 50+ on them. All right, battle of ranked teams. This is an interesting one. Undefeated teams. Kansas at Texas, and the Longhorns are favored by 17, Shane. Last year, I think it was 55-14 Texas. Who you got?
Longhorns to cover. Yeah, they're at home. Kansas is going to do the same thing that they did last year and fade. Kansas is just not that good. Texas, I think, I don't know their national championship contender just yet because I just don't. That win over Alabama isn't as impressive as I thought it was, but I think Texas covers at home.
Jeff?
Texas is kind of one of those teams that you watch the game and you're like, oh, Texas is struggling against whomever they're playing. And then the next thing you see, they've won the game by 26 points. Yeah. They just kind of keep rolling, which is something we haven't seen out of Texas the last couple of years. I like Kansas a lot. I think they've got great leadership there at the coaching position, and they've got some talent. They've got some speed, but this Texas team is really, really good. So I'm taking Texas at home, minus the 17.
I'm actually going to disagree with you guys here. I think Kansas finds a way to lose this game by only 2 touchdowns. I think Kansas is legit. Their defense is probably better than it's been in years, just like Arizona's is. And I think Texas hasn't, I know they played well against Baylor, but against Wyoming, they were nothing special. I think Kansas finds a way to keep this one closer than people think. And so I'll take them plus the points in this one. Now, this is a tricky one here. Georgia's a 14.5-point favorite at Auburn. Boy, I went back and forth on this one, and I'm reluctantly going to take Georgia just because Auburn's offense has been awful lately. Shane, what do you think?
Georgia is due to lay an egg at some point, not necessarily lose, but it's the game I think is at Missouri last year where they just looked like garbage and found a way to win. I feel like this might be that game this year. I think Georgia wins, but I don't think they're going to cover.
Jeff?
I don't think there's going to be enough points scored in this game, period, for Georgia to cover this point spread away. A 14.5-point spread. If the only way that Georgia can cover that, I think, is if they completely shut Auburn out, and I don't think they'll do that. So I like Auburn to cover in like a 17-6 kind of game. It's going to be ugly.
Yeah, I'm going to roll with Georgia. I think Georgia finds a way to score 24 or more. I don't see Auburn scoring more than a touchdown, maybe 10 points. I can see Georgia getting to 27. Go from there. All right, LSU -2.5 at Ole Miss. Another matchup of ranked teams. Shane, I don't even know what to think about this one, but go ahead, give us your a pick here.
Yeah, it's tough. Ole Miss, they could have won that game against Alabama. They faded late. LSU, I think, has kind of figured things out since getting humbled early in the season against Florida State. I like LSU to win and cover in this one.
Jeff?
LSU was banged up last week. They were missing 3 of their starters on offense due to injury. From what I've heard, they're going to be getting those players back. And I think that was a big part of the reason why they kind of slowed down a little bit last week. They were really slow out the gates against Arkansas. And I love LSU -2.5 at Ole Miss.
Yeah, I think it's a good bet there. I'm playing the under. That's going to be my play on that. Ole Miss 7 straight unders when they faced ranked teams. LSU overall 8 straight overs, converging trends here. I remember LSU was unranked last year. Ole Miss was undefeated, and LSU spanked them. I think LSU wins this game by, a touchdown or so. So I like the 2.5 as well. All right, Oregon is -27 at a team we Arizona fans know fairly well from recent bias or from recent watching them, and that's Stanford. So Oregon -27 at Stanford, Jeff. Can the Cardinal find a way to cover against this juggernaut?
This has got hangover game written all over it for Oregon, a team that has poured all of their emotions, energy, physicality into the game last week and teaching the Prime Buffaloes a lesson. And not to mention, for some reason, I don't know what it is, Oregon can barely get out of their way when they get to Palo Alto. It's been that way over the years, and we've seen it time and time again. I don't think I just don't see it possibly happening that Oregon wins this game by more than 4 touchdowns. So I like Stanford plus the 27.
Shane?
Yeah, I agree with Jeff. I think that Oregon poured so much energy into that Colorado game, so much emotion that I think they're going to beat Stanford. But I think that it could be within the spread, I think. And Stanford's defense isn't bad. They can score a couple touchdowns. So, and even if Oregon gets up by 5 scores, Stanford scores a late one. So I like Oregon to win, but I think Stanford covers.
Yeah, I think Stanford finds a way to cover as well. I love what Jeff said as far as his logic goes. A hangover game. It's exactly why I picked Stanford getting 4 touchdowns. I don't think they win by. I think somewhere between 20 and 26 points seems a sweet spot to me. I think Oregon is a lot better than I gave him credit for. Notre Dame is a 5.5-point favorite at Duke. What an epic game against Ohio State last week. The line was 3. They pushed. We all saw the end of the game there. I like Notre Dame to win this game by at least a touchdown. It's impressive what Duke's done, but Duke really hasn't beaten anybody. I'm not sold on Clemson, so I'm going to go with Notre Dame here. Jeff?
Yeah, you're right about Duke. They keep winning, but who have they been really beating? And you mentioned, Clemson, and that was the week 1 kind of thing. And there's something happening in South Carolina that I'm not quite sure what's exactly going on, and it has nothing to do with the players. So I want to take Duke to cover this game just because I think this may be a hangover game for Notre Dame after the big primetime matchup against Ohio State, but their offense is just too good. I think last week was just a misnomer, an anomaly, if you will, and I like Notre Dame big in this game.
Shane?
Yeah, I do enjoy when game day goes out to so-called basketball schools like Duke and Kansas, and they've been to Arizona twice. Of course, Arizona's 0-2 in those games. I think Duke's going to follow suit. I think they lose. I think Notre Dame exposes them. It's a tough loss for Notre Dame against Ohio State. And they're going to have, it's going to be tough for them maybe to regroup, and maybe having game day there, being on the road, will get them back in the swing of things. I think they find a way to win this game by at least a touchdown.
So I wasn't sure whether to include this game, Florida or Florida at Kentucky, but I'm going to go with Alabama minus 14.5 at Mississippi State is the game that we're going to choose as our last one before we get to the final two. I'm going to go with Mississippi State here. I just think Alabama's Alabama's offense not that good. I think Mississippi State can hang. I know this line's kind of tricky, but I think Mississippi State can keep this a 10-point game or so. So, Shane, do you agree?
No, I think it's more because I don't think Alabama's that good. I just think Mississippi State, I really, really was hoping that they were a good team, that Arizona lost in overtime to a good team. They lost to an average team, unfortunately. I think Alabama, they're not the usual Alabama, but I think Jalen Milroe started to maybe show that he can be the guy going forward. I think they find a way to cover.
Jeff?
Jalen Milroe has not played against the two best linebackers in the country, and that's what he's facing this weekend in Starkville. And I love Mississippi State plus the 14.5. I might be even coerced to pick them straight up.
Okay. Whoa, okay. There we go. That's what we're talking about.
Those two linebackers, right. You ask anybody who's played Mississippi State, they'll tell you those two linebackers are the two best players. That when you say the two best players that play together at any particular position, those are the two best players in the country at their position. Wow.
How about that? All right. I'm going to let Jeff start with this one. Cal is a 12-point favorite at home against ASU. I know how much you love to pick ASU. Wait, sorry. Wrong guest. So, Jeff, who you got? Cal minus 12 against ASU.
What a horrible game. I mean, really. I mean, this game's just got stink written all over it, right? Yeah. And when you say stink, usually that either means that it's just a completely lopsided win with one team that's so much better than the other team, or it's just two teams that have a hard time getting out of their own way. I think it's the latter, and I think it's a close game. So I'm going to take ASU plus the 12 just because it's an ugly game, and I don't think Cal gets away from them.
Shane?
Yeah, I think ASU started to put it together a little bit, gain a little bit of confidence against USC. Skater Bro, I'm going to call him Skater Bro, had some at a phenomenal game. Interesting to see if Drew Pine continues at quarterback, because whoever starts at quarterback just doesn't have any time to throw for ASU. That's the problem. And Cal, they put up 500 yards against Washington, but a lot of that was kind of late in the game when it didn't really matter. I think ASU puts up another tough performance, but it's on the road against a Cal team that's due to win. I agree with Jeff. I think Cal wins probably by a touchdown.
I'm actually going to lay the points here, and I'm not confident in it. Don't get me wrong, but I just feel like Cal's going to win this game by a couple of touchdowns. I just don't think ASU is that good, and it's also kind of a letdown game for them. They got amped up for the home crowd against USC, and then they lost by 2 touchdowns. I don't think Cal's very good, but if Cal's going to beat anybody by 2 touchdowns the rest of the year, that's probably it. So I'm going to roll with Cal minus 12. I'm not confident in that, but all right, I'm going to go with it. All right, finally, Washington is a 17.5-point favorite at Arizona. Can the Wildcats pull the biggest upset in this stadium? And I don't know. We talked about it earlier in the show in a long time. All right, Jeff, I'm going to start with you. I don't know if you can give a score prediction, just maybe if you want to give one, great. And just maybe your thoughts against the spread there.
Well, unfortunately, I can't give any prediction.
Okay.
So I'm just going to say that I hope that everyone shows up Saturday night, Arizona Stadium, clad in red, ready to scream on their team. Shows up early. The emails went out today. Everybody take heed to the emails. Please show up early. Get there before the kickoff. Be there to cheer on your team when they take the field. The new video this year is awesome. I know 90% of you have not seen it yet. So come early. Enjoy the game. Enjoy the festivities. And I hope everyone has a great time. And I hope that Arizona can come out with a victory.
So, Shane, I'll let you make the next pick here. Go for it.
Yeah, I'm with Jeff. I just hope both teams have fun. That's all. No, it's hard to say between without knowing who's going to start a quarterback. I mean, I don't know if it matters in terms of the win or loss. I'm going to pick Washington either way, but it could matter in terms of the spread. And certainly, I'm a little more hopeful that Noah Fifita could be the game manager that Jayden de Laura hasn't been. I don't think Arizona's going to find a way to stop Michael Penix for 4 quarters. Maybe they'll get a couple stops, a couple of sacks early and get the crowd into it, make it an interesting game. I think reality sets in at some point, and Penix is just going to pick that secondary apart. The score that's been stuck in my head, it's right at where the spread is, 17.5. I'm going to take Washington just barely to cover. I've got Washington 49, Arizona 31.
Wow. Okay. Right close to that spread. Well,
yeah.
You know what? I just have a feeling there's just something. I think Washington's really good. I think Michael Penix very well could win the Heisman. I'm 4-0 against the spread and picking Arizona games this year. Yes, I'm going to tout that record while I can. So you know what? What the heck? I'm taking Arizona plus the points. I don't think they're going to win the game, but I think this game is competitive going into the fourth quarter, like we saw against USC last year. I'm going to say Washington 40, Arizona 27. You know what? If this game's close and Arizona can generate pressure against Penix, never know. I don't know. I have a feeling this one's going to be fun. I don't think, Shane and I are going to the game. I do not think we're going to be leaving as early as you would think. Washington closer than the experts think. We'll roll with that. To our buddy Jeff Dean for joining us, thank you so much. As always, great to have you on the program. For Shane Dale, I'm Eric Cohen. Thanks for listening. And as always, bear down.